In a recent mailbag for Sportsnet, top Habs insider Eric Engels reveals who he believes is the top Habs target for free agency this next season, and, well, it has some Habs fans pretty pumped about that possibility. We're going to dive into that. Plus, Ivan Demidov, he played again, and he's showing some flashes of brilliance again, nearly sniping one and showing some fantastic chemistry with Evgeny Kuznetsov, a few give and goes, even leading to multiple scoring opportunities. We're going to dive into all of that coming up on this episode of Habs Digest. But before we get into the video, guys, I just want to ask you to hit the subscribe button. We're trying to hit 15,000 before the start of the season. We just crossed 14,000. If you want daily Montreal Canadiens news, rumors, reports, game reactions, all that stuff, this is your home for it. Hit the button down below. We're going to get straight into the video. No hesitation. I want to talk about Demidov a little bit. I'll play those highlights for you again. He almost scored. He almost did it, but he didn't. Though Xhekaj did get their first win of the season, Demidov was held off the score sheet. He only registered one official shot on goal, not including this one that he rang off the post. Absolute missile of a shot, by the way, but, you know, he looked a little dejected after that. Knew he should have had that one, but look at this here between him and Evgeny Kuznetsov. Some give and goes here. A little pass to Kuznetsov leads to a scoring chance in front, and, well, he does still have some stuff to learn as he gets kind of blown up at the blue line. Now, first of all, I want to talk about that last hit just for a second because, of course, I'm naturally on Twitter. I'm looking all over at these Demidov highlights, and one thing that I noticed on Twitter, I don't know what it is about Senators fans. They're all over this Demidov stuff. A lot of people just hating on Demidov. Oh, he got to keep his head up. Look at this, his first taste of actually playing against men. And don't forget, Demidov had a primary assist on in his last game with a couple of flashes of incredible brilliance. Not going to get too much into that stuff there, but we're going to stay positive about Demidov again. Not his best game, still not near the top in terms of minutes, but I think what we're seeing, maybe what the most encouraging thing is from what we saw in this game, from the highlights, is his chemistry with Kuznetsov, because again, Kuznetsov is a guy that we've talked about a lot. As soon as we heard he was going to Xhekaj, we're like, okay, this is a great opportunity for Demidov, not only because he gets to play with a clearly talented player, though albeit a player who's a bit past their prime, of course, due to injuries and some other things, but it's the things he gets to learn about winning, about maturing in the game. Kuznetsov is one of these guys that could still light the lamp in the KHL, but he's really there, and it seems like he's taken over that role of mentoring Demidov in some ways, right? You can see, like, these guys right away, as Grant McCagg pointed out, he's actually the one that tweeted that video where I took it from. I'll link all these highlights down below, the 3 highlights I took for this video, by the way. Go check him out on Twitter. But Grant McCagg made a great point saying, like, look at this chemistry developing already between Demidov and Kuznetsov. We saw it a bit in the preseason, but to see this come into life in an actual KHL game, well, it really bodes well for Demidov because, again, the mistakes he's making, like having to keep his head up at the blue line, though it happens. I mean, like, look, he kind of lost control of the puck. It's not like he got absolutely destroyed and it was completely his fault. He is going to have to try some of these little dangle moves, some of these things before, you know, he gets that full handle of it, because there are going to be a lot of times, not only just in the KHL, but also whenever he comes over to North America, where the moves he was pulling off when he was a little younger just aren't going to fly anymore. And that's fine. It's just the nature of learning things. You got to fail at something before you succeed. Very few people are going to come into the NHL and dangle around every single player on their first day. And again, don't forget, there's a lot of fantastic players in the NHL today who went through the KHL and the MHL, and they weren't looking as good, as comfortable as Demidov is already. So regardless, go check out the highlights. Go take a look at what Demidov did. Not an amazing game by any means, but that missile of a shot and the chemistry developing with an NHL legend, really, a Stanley Cup winner in Kuznetsov, is, well, it bodes very well for the future. But we're going to move on to the crux of this video, and I'm excited to get into this because we're starting to talk about 2025, and that's right, Mikko Rantanen has been a name that is the most recently linked to Montreal, not in any official capacity, of course. This is from Eric Engels' recent mailbag, which I will link down below. There's some great questions and answers there, and of course, follow Eric Engels everywhere you can. He has a lot of the best scoops from Montreal. Excuse me. But I'm going to get into what he said here. He said, the obvious answer when referring to the top Habs free agent targets is Mikko Rantanen. He goes on to say, though, but I don't think his name will be on the board for much longer. That's fair. He projects Mikko Rantanen's going to sign an extension, but you really never know what's going to happen. But we'll move on to what else he said. He said, I'd be looking at some of the veteran talent that's likely to be available and seeing if it fits with the needs. And glancing over the list, there are more than a few names I see that are likely on the Canadiens' radar. So I will get into Rantanen in just a bit, but I want to go through some of these other names that we're talking about here first. So right here, I got a screenshot of the top players that are going to be UFAs in 2025 by their previous AAV, in terms of their previous contract, the size of their previous contract. Now, there's names here like John Tavares, who I just don't see the Montreal Canadiens going for at this point. 35 years old. I don't think he'd go to Montreal anyway. But again, you see some interesting names like Sidney Crosby. Brent Burns is probably a bit too old, but there's some defensemen here, right? There's some interesting names here like Brock Besser, right? Claude Giroux is, again, quite old, but has a veteran leader type thing. Like, you don't get a Crosby. If Giroux's still able to play, you bring him in. It's not the craziest thing. I don't think any of that's really going to happen. But still, you never really know. Brad Marchand's another name that probably wouldn't happen, but there's some other guys when you go down below, like, I think it's like, some goalies and stuff like that, but all in all, there's some good names, but the main guy that we want to talk about, of course, is Mikko Rantanen, so we're going to have to get into his stats. Like, here we go. 80 games last year, 42 goals, 62 assists for 104 points. Now, he's a guy that we've been comparing Slav a lot to, mainly because of their development curve. If you guys remember that graph, maybe we'll have to go find that graph again, that shows Slav at the same age, or at the same, time in the NHL after their draft year versus Mikko Rantanen. Slav is outpacing him, and Rantanen had a big jump in year 3, and we're anticipating something maybe a little similar for Slav, but there's no ifs, ands, or buts around it. Mikko Rantanen is one of the best players in the NHL. Straight up, across the board, he's huge, he's 6'4", he had a 61.1% Corsi for, an incredible expected plus minus, not to mention 42 goals, 104 points. Now, what is the likelihood that Montreal actually manages to get Mikko Rantanen? Well, that all depends on Colorado's situation. Colorado is in a mode now where they're kind of like, let's just keep trying to win. They already got one cup. They want to get more and more and more. And of course, they got McKinnon there. Landeskog may come back and even play this season. But not to mention, they still have Cale Makar on defense and a bunch of other very solid players. At this point, it wouldn't make sense for them to let Mikko Rantanen go. They're going to do everything they can to sign him long term. Now, again, the contract of McKinnon's eventually going to come up, and there's still question marks around Landeskog, but with the fact that you have Makar on the back end, you got a lot of very talented guys. They have Middlestat too, who's also very good last season. So, their window's still there. They're going to do what they can to sign him. Rantanen's going to command a really big contract, though, and, the only way I see him leaving is if maybe Colorado doesn't want to give him the price that he wants. I mean, we're seeing some holdout on that Jeremy Swayman contract right now in Boston, though recent reports say he's a lot closer to signing than first anticipated. So if Colorado's not ready to give out what Rantanen's probably going to ask for, and in the area of $12 to $14 million, you can almost be certain, especially after Draisaitl sort of set the market there for the future with that $14 million per year contract. Rantanen's going to be asking for something similar. And if you're Colorado, you start to wonder, okay, is this the price we're willing to pay for him? The answer is almost certainly going to be yes, but isn't it fun to think that Montreal is in on this? We're going back to Kent Hughes' quotes of saying, like, the summer of 2025 is going to be bigger than the summer of 2024, and hey, the Habs had a really big summer this year. They landed Patrick Laine. Now, maybe Kent wasn't expecting that kind of deal to fall into his lap when he was talking about it, but the Habs were linked to names like Rucker McGroarty, Trevor Zegras, pretty much any young, talented player around the league, not to mention Laine, who they did end up going and getting. So the idea that next season Montreal could be a big player in free agency, I think is very possible. However, again, if I look at this list, other than Rantanen, I'm not super sure of any guys, though I guess Sidney Crosby is one of those guys that stands out. Hey, you know what? For the hell of it, let's bring back Jeff Petrie. No, I digress. But hey, Besser's another interesting name. I could look at these names all day. Go have a look at the UFA class yourself, because there are some other veteran names, even down lower in this list, that $4 or $5 million range, that could be a nice fit just for a short term, just to, fill in the void for Montreal in the next coming seasons. You see David Savard and Yoel Armia on that list as well. Christian Dvorak probably not coming back to Montreal. But anyway, I love talking about this next offseason. We're not even in this season yet. It's a great mix of what's about to come with Demidov and some amazing signings the Habs could make next year. So let me know your thoughts about Rantanen down below. Do you truly believe Montreal could land him? I'm of the mind that Colorado's going to do everything they can to keep him. I don't see this happening, but it's very, very fun to think about. That'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. Let's hit 15K. I'd love to see that happen before the season. I've been your host, Josh Goss. I'll catch you in the next one.